Hello there. What is going on, everybody? We're going to talk about Star Wars Armada Sector Fleet today. What is it? Why should you care? And is it official? Is it something you can actually do? And how can you get the rules and all that? What is it? So we're going to answer all of those questions, hopefully. And if you are new to it, or if it's something you've kind of gotten away from, maybe you can I can reintroduce it to you, and it can be a very cool way to spice up your Star Wars Armada games. If you guys are new here to the channel, I talk a lot about Star Wars Armada, tabletop games, board games, and of course where all those all converge. And Armada is one of my favorite games, and with the cancellation of development, of course, you know, there really wasn't any development for years anyway. It's one of those things I've always wanted to kind of remind people of. Hey, you know, if the game's growing a little stale for you, and it's not growing stale for me yet, but you know, there's lots of alternative ways to play, and this one is a very, very cool one. So we're going to talk about this today. There's also that $25 Amazon gift card giveaway we're doing right now. So if you are new and haven't already, make sure you're subscribed and leave a comment on this or one of my videos that enters you to win. This will run for about 2 weeks, and we'll announce the winner at the end of one of my videos there. A big thing about Sector Fleet is it's an official format. So I'm going to switch. We're going to change up the background here, and we'll go through some of the rules. This was actually made by Fantasy Flight Games. So when they were doing campaigns, you had you know, they had the Corellian conflict was the first campaign they did, and it culminated in this massive battle of 3 versus 3, a huge battle. Because I think you can get your fleets up to like 500 points in that, and then you could like put them all together for a 1,500 point battle, and it had its own rules within that campaign. But I think a lot of people, you know, there was a need for, well, what if we want to do a big battle like that without having to do a whole campaign? What if we just want to do a standalone big battle for a big fun event or whatever? And so they had released these Sector Fleet rules, and there were a number of reasons to release these, not just for campaigns, but for individual fun battles. Also, when they were releasing things like the Super Star Destroyer, which has four cards, only 2 of which are legal in a 400-point game, because the other ones extend beyond the limits of a 400-point game. So they needed official rules beyond a 400-point game. Now, granted, Star Wars Armada is a game that can be played at any points limit, as long as you agreed upon it with your opponent. However, organized play games and official games and balance for the game is, you know, initially it was 300 points. They changed it to 400 points after the first wave of expansion. So when you just had core sets in wave 1, it was 300, and then when more stuff came available, they said it's 400. So it was kind of fluid at the beginning. But 600 points is a kind of a game form that I like to play at for a number of reasons, because it's close enough to the 400-point format, and this covers that and a lot of other things. So. And by the way, if you're interested in these rules that we're going to be looking at, these are all available on Crabbok.com. If you're in the Armada Facebook group, they're available in the Armada Facebook group. We have you know, we have an art, like basically a pinned section in there with links and stuff, and Derek had put together a lot of different rules that were there. You may know him as Karnak, but he's done a lot of great work for the Armada community. He has a lot of pinned rules there as well. If you go to Crabbok.com, I also have these there under Armada guides. I'll put a link down in the video description below as well, but you can download them there as well. So what is this, right? So there's a couple of changes to Sector Fleet. For example, if you're running a Sector Fleet tournament, there's alternative tournament points, because you'll be playing with slightly larger fleets, so your margin of victory is going to be impacted by that. So in order to get a 10-1, you would need a 500-point margin of victory, which normally wouldn't be possible in a 400-point game. So, well, I should say would be unlikely. I know there are definitely certain objectives that can push you over a 500-point margin of victory. Although it's very hard to do that, but it's happened, I think, more than once. But basically, so there's 2-player Sector Fleet, and this isn't a very long document. I think it's only like 4 or 5 pages. 2-player Sector Fleet outlines 600 points, 800 points, 1,000 points, and 1,200 points. Now, I will say this. If you're getting up into these, your game is going to take a long time. If you're playing over 1,000 points, It's going to take a very, very long time. I'd like 600 or 800 personally, because 600 gets you, the ability to take 3 Starhawks if you wanted to recreate the, the Battle of Jakku, or a larger Super Star Destroyer, or maybe 2 Super Star Destroyers if you are completely insane, But you could do certain fun things like this with Sector Fleet. There's also some other changes too. And a lot of people have said, when I've talked about higher point games, they said one of the biggest drawbacks is like, yeah, but I don't want 200 points of squadrons in a 600 point game, because again, a third of your fleet goes to squadrons. Well, in Sector Fleet, they thought about that and they changed it a little bit. You still have a little bit more for squadrons, but when you're playing Sector Fleet, you have 1/4 of your list is dedicated to squadron or reserve that can be used for squadrons. Not dedicated. You don't have to bring squadrons. So instead of 134 points like you would have in a 400 point game, if you're playing a 600 point Sector Fleet game, that's going to just be 150. So you're only getting like 16 extra points. So that's like 1 extra squadron for a whole 600 point game, which is very cool. And it might not mean any extra squadrons. It may just mean you upgrade one of those squadrons to an ace. Now, you will still have, if, for example, at a 600 point game, you would still have other rules to abide by. For example, the rule about unique squadrons with defense tokens, how you can normally only have 4 because it's 1 per every 100 points. In a 600 point game, that would mean you would be able to bring 6 aces with defense tokens. You can have 3 flotillas outlined right here. So these are the important rules for 2-player Sector Fleet. This is all outlined. You can read over this if you want. There's also multiplayer Sector Fleet that is outlined here as well. Now here they only go up to 1,200 point games. You're certainly able to go higher than this. You'll just be using custom rules at that point, because Sector Fleet was meant to be an official format that could be used for events and have tournament points. That's why they put tournament points in here. So if you wanted to run a tournament that was going to be using larger stuff, it becomes like a 2,000 point tournament. Okay, you get 1 game in that day. You're not going to be able to really have much. So I think that's why they put a cap of about 1,200 points here, though. Although, frankly, I think if you're going to run Sector Fleet, 600 points is probably where I would recommend. And you could do this as a team thing, or do it as a 2-player. I think a 600 point 2-player game of Sector Fleet won't take you very much longer than a 400 point game. One big reason is that your squadron's profile is probably going to stay about the same. I also think that a lot of people will be tempted to bring bigger ships, to bring something like a larger Super Star Destroyer, so you could end up with like maybe only 2 or 3 activations in a 600 point game, because you're going to be so tempted to put even more upgrades and more into more expensive ships that you couldn't normally bring. If somebody runs triple Starhawk, I mean, goodness gracious, that would be a nightmare to try to punch through all of that. But maybe you could do it because you'd have more punching power. So there's a lot of really cool things about Sector Fleet that allow you to experiment with design space that's outside of the normal 400 point sort of area. So we have rules about this, and the team rules are very interesting too. So if you're playing team games of Sector Fleet, you'll have a Grand Admiral who kind of breaks ties, and that's like a person on each side. It really doesn't change any game rules, but it does change, like, if the team has to make a decision, the Grand Admiral is basically the tiebreaker, and so they can kind of supersede certain things. But also, there are certain rules about if you're running a team game and you everybody brings their own fleet. There's basically if I bring General Dodonna, and you bring, Leia, hey, your effect isn't going to work towards me. There's a lot of barriers of hey, I'm running Admiral Akbar, and all of a sudden it's yeah, but how does that work? Does that mean everybody on your entire side gets Admiral Akbar? And no, that doesn't. Although that could be a fun alternate format too, but that would be very much like a homebrew format, because it could lead to some insanely overpowered combinations of what if we all brought Admiral Akbar and we had triple Akbar and everybody's rolling everybody's borrowing all the red dice in the whole store. No, Like that's wrong for a number of levels because you couldn't have, you know, more than one unique. And that's another thing. If you're running team games, it's a little more tricky because players will have to make sure that they're not duplicating any uniques and things like that. And you're also going to have like a specific enemy. So like if I'm running Dodonna, there's stuff like, all right, well, my effect that targets an opponent, it's going to target Joey over there. And I'll, you know, I announce that opponent at the beginning of the game. And so, but like there's rules for all of that. But I think it's cleanest at a 1 versus 1 game at 600 points. Again, I've said that a number of times. It's what I like to play. I think you can get games in relatively quick, and I don't think it takes a whole lot longer than a 400-point game. And in my experience, I've had games that were over faster than 400-point games because we were doing 600 points and there were just less ships overall. But it's a fun way to play. I wanted to remind you guys of where where the rules are for Sector Fleet, and that it is an official Fantasy Flight Games fleet. It's a little older, but it was actually, you know, published by FFG. So if you were thinking of trying to run an event, if you're maybe a community organizer, a tournament organizer, or thinking of putting on something and trying to do something a little different, here's an option. There are official rules out there, and there's tournament points as well. And so it's, you know, it's not going to be too different, but you know, maybe take a poll of your communities and see if they would be interested in running a Sector Fleet tournament one of these months. You know, see how it goes, and you might find that you have a new favorite format to be able to alternate between you know, the regular 400-point events and a Sector Fleet. You might just do a 2-round tournament. You know, if time is slightly a concern, do a 2-round tournament, which is kind of like a casual play plus. And then see if that took longer than than you expected. I think you guys will be pleasantly surprised, and I think you'll have a great time. All right, that's going to do it for today's video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are out of this world and help make this whole channel possible. I will talk to you later. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes, and always wash your socks.